The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the hospital room, mixing with the faint hum of machines and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. Her lips were pale, her breath shallow, and yet her eyes, those weary eyes, searched the doorway one last time. She had begged him to come. Her husband, the man she had given her youth, her dreams, her very soul. But the door never opened. He never came, and in those final, devastating moments, she understood a truth that broke her more than the illness consuming her body. He had chosen someone else. He had chosen her, the mistress. When she closed her eyes for the last time, she thought it was the end. But fate had a different plan. She was reborn, not in another body, not in some faraway world, but in the very moment before her downfall truly began. The moment when she still had her health, her dignity, and her chance to rewrite everything. Only this time, she wasn't the meek, forgiving wife who would endure years of betrayal. No, this time she was fire. This time she would not plead, she would not wait. She would rise, and she would destroy him. Her name was Alara. For years, she had been the perfect wife. Devoted, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who placed her husband, Damien, above herself. She believed in their vows, believed in his promises, believed that her love could withstand his distance and coldness. But in her last life, she had died believing a lie. That love meant sacrifice, that devotion meant forgiveness at any cost, that her worth was tied to him. Not this time. The first morning of her rebirth was surreal. She awoke to sunlight streaming through the curtains of the home she once cherished but eventually despised. The sheets smelled the same. The room looked the same. Damien wasn't home. He was away, on a business trip, though Alara now knew what that truly meant. He was with her, Clara, the mistress, the woman Alara once pitied but later realized was her executioner in disguise. The first challenge Alara faced was the disbelief in herself. Was this real? Had she truly been given another chance? Or was she dreaming? But as the days unfolded, memories of her past death sharpened her resolve. She knew exactly what path Damien would take, the excuses he would make, the betrayals he would weave behind the mask of a successful, charming husband. And she decided, she would not let him steal another ounce of her life. At first, she played her part carefully. She smiled at Damien when he returned, listened to his empty words, and nodded at his excuses. But instead of her heart breaking, her mind sharpened. Every word he spoke, every look he gave, she analyzed with the clarity of someone who had already seen the ending. And as she quietly gathered her strength, she began to build something he never expected, independence. In her past life, Alara had sacrificed her career for his. She had abandoned her ambitions to support his dreams. But this time, she returned to the passions she once buried. She began writing again. Stories that poured from her heart, stories of women who rose from ashes, stories of betrayal and redemption. Soon, her words began to capture attention. Her name, once hidden behind the shadow of her husband, started to shine. But with each step forward, the challenges grew. Damien noticed her change. He grew suspicious of her late nights, her quiet confidence, the way she no longer hung on his every word. "You've been distant," he accused one evening, his voice sharp. "Is there someone else?" The irony nearly made her laugh. In her old life, those words had cut her deeply. But now, she met his eyes with a calm strength that startled him. "No, Damien," she replied smoothly. "There's just me this time. And I finally remembered how important I am." It rattled him, because men like Damien thrived on control, and Alara was slipping from his grasp. The second challenge was Clara, the mistress. In Alara's previous life, Clara had been smug, confident in her hold over Damien, reveling in the destruction she caused. But now, Alara saw her clearly for what she was, not a rival, but a pawn in Damien's selfish game. Clara was younger, yes, and beautiful in a shallow way, but she was also fragile, desperate for validation. Damien had promised her the world, just as he had once promised Alara. This time, Alara did not confront Clara with anger. Instead, she confronted her with truth. One afternoon, she met Clara in the very cafe where Damien used to meet her in secret. Clara's face paled when Alara sat across from her, calm and composed. "You don't know him like I do," Clara spat defensively. "Oh, I know him better than you ever will," Alara replied softly. "And one day, you'll realize he never chose either of us. He only ever chose himself." The words unsettled Clara more than rage ever could. Because deep down, Clara knew it was true. Alara walked away, leaving Clara shaken, her illusions cracking. But the greatest challenge of all was emotional, the ghosts of her own weakness. Even with her newfound strength, there were nights when the memories of her deathbed returned. The loneliness, the betrayal, the pain of waiting for someone who never came. On those nights, Her hands trembled as she held a pen, her tears blurring the ink. Yet she pushed through, because she wasn't writing only for herself anymore. She was writing for every woman who had been silenced, every woman who had been betrayed, every woman who had forgotten her worth. Her stories soon reached thousands, then millions. Publishers offered her contracts. She spoke at events where women wept as they listened, finding courage in her words. Slowly, Alara realized that her rebirth wasn't about destroying Damien at all. It was about rebuilding herself. And yet, the destruction came naturally. Damien's empire began to crumble. The more Alara rose, the more his lies unraveled. Colleagues whispered about his affairs, investors pulled out, and his perfect mask began to crack. Clara eventually left him, disillusioned and bitter. And in the end, Damien stood alone, just as he had left Alara alone on her deathbed. One evening, he appeared at her door, disheveled and desperate. "Alara," he pleaded, his voice hoarse. "I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can start over." Once, those words would have shattered her resolve. Once, she would have clung to the hope of his love. But not now. Alara looked at him with steady eyes, the same eyes that had once searched that hospital doorway in vain. "No, Damien, you made your choice, and I made mine." She closed the door, not with hatred, but with peace. Because her revenge was never about breaking him, it was about freeing herself. Alara's story became a beacon. She continued to write, to inspire, to remind women everywhere that their worth was not defined by the people who failed them, but by the strength they found within themselves. And so, her rebirth was not just the undoing of betrayal, but the awakening of a truth that resonated far beyond her own life. That sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply choosing yourself. Sparkle's inspiring closing message for YouTube narration. To anyone listening, remember this: your mom worth is not tied to someone else's love, loyalty, or approval. You hold the pen to your own story. Don't wait until it's too late to start writing it. Like Alara, you can rise from the ashes of betrayal and turn your pain into power. And if you felt her story, if you believe in rising again, don't forget to subscribe, because this is only the beginning.